Hello, welcome to the second tutorial from Renee's House of Quilting Spring Club. Last tutorial was on the 4-in-1 triangle ruler from Creative Grid. This little handy guy right here. And we did 2 table runners using that particular ruler. This is the second one. This is called Wyoming Stars. And this was made using the 4-in-1 triangle ruler from Creative Grid. In our first tutorial, we used method number 3 from the 4-in-1 triangle ruler from Creative Grid, and we created a hourglass block and a half square triangle block, which we used to create the first pattern, which was called ring talk. This tutorial is going to go over the 4-in-1 triangle ruler using method number 2, which is cutting triangles from a strip. For this, you need the pattern, Wyoming Stars table runner. Obviously, you're going to need the 4-in-1 ruler from Creative Grid. You're also going to need spray starch, marking tape. I need to remind myself where the strip size is, so I put a piece of marking tape on it. That's what that oranges that you see on this ruler. You need background fabric, and in this case, this is the background fabric, this is the colored fabric. You need a rotary cutter. I also recommend a 1/4 inch foot because you have to be pretty accurate when you sew these. The first tutorial you marked and sewed. This one you cut, and then you're going to sew your 1/4 inch seam. I want to familiarize you with some markings on this ruler. You'll see that there's a black tip, actually a triangle at the top of the ruler, and then there's numbers on the ruler. On the left hand side, the white numbers are the actual finished size of that half square triangle for the strip that number is laying over. So for this project, I cut 2.5 inch strips, which is going to yield a 2 inch finished half square triangle. The first cut, you square up the left edge of your strip. So this edge here I squared up so it's straight. I laid my ruler, and again, this is a 2.5 inch strip underneath this piece of tape. That's what it says, 2.5 inch, and you can see that it's going to give me a 2 inch finished half square triangle. So my first cut is, you want to line this up and you're going to cut this way. Then when you rotate it, the ruler 180 degrees, and you line it up this way, again with the tip is going to be, now that black tip will be at the bottom. Then now the black tip would be at the bottom, and then you're going to get this shape. So you just keep turning your ruler back and forth. So the first cut looks like that. You take your ruler, you're going to turn it 180 degrees, line that black tip again. I apologize for the, there we go. Line that black tip again, and you're going to cut. So back and forth, back and forth. Each one of these blocks requires 36 2 inch finished half square triangles, so 36 2.5 inch unfinished half square triangles. I want to give you some tips for sewing these triangles. When you start your triangles, your 2 pieces that are together, through your sewing machine, I highly recommend that you use a leader. So this goes through first. That way I'm not dragging this point down into my feed dogs. You'll notice I put a ruler on here. My seam, that's that white, is there, and when I line this up, I have quite a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't making these too big. So I put a ruler on there, and this is a 2.5 inch unfinished half square triangle. So you're going to have a pretty scant 1/4 inch seam, as I showed you. Let me review the steps again. Be sure that you starch your fabric. This fabric is is pretty stiff. Can you see that? It's not bending over much. So I've starched this very well, and the reason for that is, again, you're dealing with bias edges. Use a 1/4 of an inch foot if you have one, or mark the bed of your sewing machine so that you're doing a scant 1/4 of an inch, meaning less than a 1/4 of an inch, as I showed you on the ruler. First of all, you need to straighten the left edge of your fabric before you lay your ruler on there, because you're going to line the edge of your ruler right along with the edge. So I lined the edge of this ruler right along the edge of that fabric. You're going to do your first cut, which is the one where the ruler is lined up against the straight part. So that's cut number 1. And then you're going to turn it 180 degrees so that that black triangle is now at the bottom of your strips, and you're going to cut your second cut. You keep going back and forth until you run out of fabric. When you press these half square triangles, I would highly recommend that you press towards the dark. And this was not pressed on the iron, I just finger pressed it. So I just pushed along with my thumb to finger press those. Sometimes we can get carried away when we press with the actual iron, and we iron instead of pressing. So pressing is just simply an up down motion. Or just take, when you have these starched this well, if you just go like that, you're good. The other thing is when you're putting these together, sometimes I like to butt my seams up. I like to nestle these seams together. And sometimes if you've pressed this very well and you go to put a couple together, you actually want the seam allowance going the other way so that you can nestle them together. So if you finger press them, then you haven't committed so much to having that seam allowance going one way or the other. Again, this is method number 2. This is on the brochure that came with my ruler. If you should happen to lose this, misplace it, you can go to creativegrid.com, and they have all the instructions there for you. And she shows you very clearly how to cut your triangles. When we were deciding on what fabric to use for this table runner, Renee had some very nice patriotic fabric. This rendering here was done in EQ8. I was able to use the actual fabric that Renee had in her store to make my mock-up of it in EQ8. So you can see that the fabric here is the fabric here. If there's enough interest in learning how to do the basics in EQ8, we'll have a class at Renee's. This pattern would be great to utilize this 4-in-1 triangle ruler, because this is a very scrappy looking quilt. It's done in black and white, but obviously you could do it in whatever, and it would be a good way to use up scraps. So if you have some 2.5-inch strips, a lot of people do 2.5-inch strips for their binding. They have those left over. So you could make some of these triangles here, and then there's some little ones. So this ruler makes all different size triangles. It makes from a 1/2 inch, ooh boy, that's a little, a 1/2 inch finished all the way up to a 4-inch finished half square triangle. So you could utilize a pattern like this, which is, like I said, salt and pepper, and it's another Villa Rosa. The first tutorial I showed you another one of these Villa Rosa patterns, and just punch a hole in the corner and hang them on a key ring. And this uses different size half square triangles. Let me just remind you that there are a few of these club kits left, which consist of the 4 patterns and a 4-in-1 triangle ruler. The price is $30, plus it comes with a discount card worth 15% on your purchases at Renee's. If you'd like to pick up one of these kits, give Renee a call and she'll hold it for you. Next week we will be discussing the corner trimmer ruler. Have a very good week. Stay safe, and God bless you, and thank you. Bye-bye.